Here's the new Humpback filter from Godsbox and Fonk. It's an SEM based multi-mode filter with input level that can drive the filter's input stage and 2 CV-ins to control the cutoff. Going through the features, we've got the low pass, band pass, high pass and notch output, all with plenty of that SEM character. There's a big cutoff knob, input level knob, resonance knob and 2 CVs with attenuators to control the cutoff. Sticking with the input level at around half, I'll go through some filter sweeps with increasing resonance before doing the same again with full input level. Here's turning up the resonance. Backing off the resonance, here's that input up full which will drive the filter nicely. So that gives a nice thick and fat low pass sweep. Going back to half input, here's the band pass. And with some resonance. And we've got that really wet and juicy sort of band pass sound. Here's full input level. Here's the high pass mode. Here's full input level on that high pass. And so this is one of my favourite sounds of a low pitch saw wave coming in with a high pass at full input level and a medium resonance. Finally, there's a notch output which works great for phaser style sounds, which I'll look at later in the video. Here's full drive and still the notch out. So that's it for the features, so let's get stuck into some patches. Here I'm looking at the high pass and sequencing the cutoff, which is something that I enjoy doing. I've got an arpeggiator playing into my oscillator, which is then going into the Humpback filter. So let's sweep that cutoff. Here's a bit more resonance and some more input level. And it's easy to coax out that SEM character, that driven SEM sort of sound. Using the CV inputs, I'll use the sequencer to move the cutoff in time with my arpeggio sequence. And we can attenuate this. And it cleans up nicely with a lower input level. Let's turn the resonance up just before self-oscillation. And we get all these chirps and gritty resonance starting to stick out. I'm going to take this out into the meth amp module next to it for some distortion, which is a great thing to do as those moving resonant peaks really give the distortion something to chew on. So it's nicely saturated. Here's taking down the CV in a manual sweep of the cutoff. And a bit less resonance and drive on the filter. And here's the CV back on. And that filter's got loads of character and it really gives that distortion something to go at. Here's some simple bass lines showing the low pass and its SEM based character. Here's the sequence going in. There's currently no resonance, and turning up the first CV input, here's an envelope to open that filter. And it responds nicely to tight envelopes, so I'll play around with that. Let's add some resonance. And as it's got two CV inputs, I'll mix in a sequence as well, so here's the sequence. Let's turn that up a bit. So the sequence is moving at half the speed of my pitch sequence. Let's lower the CV attenuation and add the envelope back in. Here's more resonance again and some more input level to drive that filter. So it's great for some characterful and punchy bass lines with the option to mix two CVs to mix your modulation sources. Here I'll look at the tracking on the filter, which isn't explicitly a 1V per octave feature that's pushed with the module, but there is a trim pot on the front of the module so you can calibrate the CV response to respond across a few octaves with a 1V per octave signal. There's also a jumper on the back of the module for the resonance response as well, which you can play around with. Here I'll have a look at the filter key tracking and turn up the cutoff, and I've got the pitch from my keyboard going into a VCO and then the VCO is going into the filter, so here's a simple major scale. So that's my input. Presuming I want to shape that wave with a filter, here's a nice resonant peak, and then when I play the keyboard going to the VCO, the wave shape will stay the same as the filter's setting is static. But if I take a copy of the pitch signal from my keyboard that's going into the oscillator, also into the CV input of the filter, you'll hear that the filter will track the pitch and play alongside the oscillator. So what I can do is take this out and start playing a sequence. I'll get the filter setting that I want. helpful. So there's a more uniform wave shape now across all of those notes. Taking out the oscillator or turning down the input, I'm going to turn up the resonance full. And this will self-oscillate. And here it is tracking pitch on its own. So here's the sequence going again, and this is just the filter with no input. Here's some phaser-like sounds from the notch output, so here's a sweep at the cutoff. With no resonance, there's still a nice sweep. Here's some more input level. And then I'll add an LFO to that and turn up the CV attenuation. So there's some simple phaser sounds from the Humpback filter. This section is going to be about audio rate modulation, and I'm using the low pass mode, and here's my input sound. With some detuned oscillators and a sub along with some noise, so the filter's got loads to go at. I'll add some modulation from a self-oscillating filter and put that into the CV input. Here's sweeping the pitch of my audio rate modulation source. Focusing in the range and depth of that modulation with a CV attenuator, we can get a more pronounced sound. And you can get these great formant and downsampling style sounds as well, so I'll have a play around with the CV depth, filter cutoff and the pitch of my audio rate modulation. Here I'll add a looping envelope that's working as a simple LFO to control the cutoff too, and this instantly takes us into some Daft Punk-like territory. Taking down the CV attenuation, here's the bandpass and here's a filter sweep. Then the audio rate modulation. Let's add that LFO again. So some nice throaty sounds in the bandpass. Let's go into the high pass mode. here's a notch filter output as well. For the last part of the video, I'm going to look at some slower filter movement and use some classic house chords as an input. So here's the sound that's coming in. And that's a minor chord just tuned up between a few oscillators. So I'm going to move that around with a sequence, and here's a filter sweep. I've got an envelope triggered for each step of the sequence that's playing these oscillators, so we can get some nice soft swells from the filter. And here's some unsynced LFO modulation as well. And let's mix these two CVs. I've also got a kick drum and a hi-hat setup and some sidechain compression against that kick, so here's the pad sound sidechained. And then adding in the kick. Then the hi-hats. Play around with the LFO. And let's change this to a bandpass output. So the Humpback filter oozes character with that SEM based design, and it's certainly a filter that will get plenty of use across all of its outputs. Hit like and subscribe for more videos every week, and check the Patreon link to see how you can support my channel.